Hey everybody, thank you very much for dialing into the Legend Within video series. Today's guest is dialing in all the way from South Africa. His name is Zuko Mdwaba. Zuko grew up in the Eastern Cape with some very humble beginnings in a large family where he worked in a general store that his family operated for the region. He went on to start his career in Johannesburg, where he studied computer science and statistics, and then became a programmer as an individual contributor for some of the largest technology companies in the world. He grew his career from there on to becoming the country manager and president for some of the largest software providers in the market today, and has several customers and teams that depend on him on a regular basis. In addition to that, his personal journey is made up of grit, determination, passion, and competitiveness as an avid racer and an avid runner, where he's went on to running some serious races like the Comrades Ultra Marathon, the Two Oceans, which is the world's largest individually timed race, the Cape Town Cycle Tour, the Nelson Mandela Legacy Ride for Hope from Johannesburg to Durban that takes over 4 days and is distance of approximately 600 kilometers of just cycling. And so I asked Zuko to come on board to share some of his experiences with us, to share some of his learnings, his guidance, and to help those that are watching this that want to hone in on their craft, adopt a growth mindset, and maximize potential and become the best version of yourself. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the video. Zuko, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's amazing that we can connect so far away from each other, right? And still have a powerful conversation like this. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Believe it or not, I am a rural boy. So I grew up in rural Eastern Cape, you know. So I've been in Johannesburg now for 24 years, which is in a big city. But before that, pre-that, I spent a number of years in Cape Town where I did my tertiary education, you've mentioned already. I studied computer science. I majored in computer science and statistics. But outside that, I'm number 5 out of 6 kids. So families were big families back in the days. So in modern life, I wouldn't afford 6 kids, I'll be honest. So I'm a son, I'm a brother, you know, I'm a cousin, I'm a friend, I'm a husband, you know, I just love family because I think family defines who we are. So that's my, where life started for me in the Eastern Cape, rural village called Colville in a district of Herschel. And then I grew up with parents that were very strict, you know, parents that were very obsessed with education. I think that's something that really helped me and everyone that grew up with me. My father to this day is still my superhero, an amazing guy. He's late now, so may his soul rest in peace. My mother, the same, you know. What I'm trying to do with my kids today is because of things that I learned from my family. Obviously, we do not have the luxury of spending as much time with our kids as our parents did. So I grew up in a family that every day after school, there would be conversations about how was your day, you know, how was that, you know, sort of a level of encouragement that to show that you are not just studying for the sake of studying, but, you know, they're showing interest in your life, you know. You know, but Rish, having said that, looking back where I am today, there's a lot of appreciation about the sacrifices that my parents made. You know, they made a lot of sacrifices, especially in the old South Africa. There were a lot of challenges that parents had to deal with. So like I said, grew up in rural Eastern Cape. This is pre-1994. So I did schooling that back then was the schooling that was notoriously known as Bantu education, you know. Right. But I think a big part of when I reflect on my life, a big part of who I am today is part of what I've mentioned already, but there's also a big part that I was, to a certain degree, privileged enough that my family had what is known in the rural villages as a general dealer. So I come from a family that was business minded, entrepreneurial. You know, they wanted to do things, you know, to help the community. And when I talk rural, I'm talking about a small community, but a general dealer, if for people who do not understand a general dealer, basically it's a store that sells basically everything. You know, it can start from food right up to building material.
Wow.
Obviously, it's not a large enterprise, but it's something that was able to feed us, was able to take us through schooling, and so yeah. Um, One of the things when I reflect back, Rish, and I sometimes I don't want to take my kids through what I went through, but I sometimes feel my kids are having it nice because at a very young age, I literally had to run the shop, you know, and I hated it as a kid back then because I was given this responsibility. But at a very young age, I had to know, possibly at an age about age about 10 already, I had to be able to deal with accounts, and because they were also basically giving credit to people,
Right,
because a
right.
lot of people that were, for example, that were relying on social grants, so we would give them credit, and then they would pay a month later. In fact, it was 2 months later back then. In the apartheid days, social grants were 2 months, not a month. So it was that, and then I was exposed to running a business at a very, very young age. I was given a responsibility to work with people at a very, very young age. The people that worked at the store, that I think there's a huge grounding that I got out of that. I had parents that, for me, were made it very clear even back then, even though we had this general dealer, was that we all have to be humble. One of the things that my father, when I think of my father, one of the things that I learned from my father is humility. He was one of the kindest people that I know, very, very humble. So I had that background, and that really, really helped me right up until metric. And then I went to tertiary. We've spoken about that already.
Right. When I listen to that summary, there's obviously a lot in there. And if I were to summarize that and categorize that into like key learnings that define your character, I take that away as you pretty much learning a lot of social responsibility from the humility of your father, but also the interaction with everybody that you communicate with on a regular basis in the store and in the family. And then also the second thing I really pick up there, right, especially with being in a big family, is that element of leadership, being able to communicate, control, orchestrate, and just have everybody together. And along with what you mentioned earlier on, getting everyone on these virtual gatherings with the family just to stay connected, right? And that by definition is being able to lead. And before I get into a little bit deeper in the leadership, the third thing I take away from that is in a bigger family, there's obviously that element of drive, but also competitiveness.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
you've really done some very impressive events and races along your time. And we talked about some of them a little bit earlier on. I'd love for you to just share a little bit around, what goes behind that drive, that determination, that passion for competitiveness, for doing some of the things that you're doing with your health and your fitness.
As you grow older, you realize I have been cycling for 17 years, Rish. I have been running maybe for 10 or 12 years, thereabout. The cycling I never forget, because I got a bike the same year that I got married. So don't draw any story around that. But I bought a bike. In fact, how I got to be exposed to cycling was because of my bigger brother, who was a cyclist already. I think maybe 4 years before I started cycling. So I was inspired by his drive with when it came to cycling. So I got into cycling. One of the things I got to realize, the more I mean, back in the days when you're starting a young family, cycling and running for me I was doing it because it was the thing to do at the time. But the more I got hooked into it, the more I realized that you have to have ambitions. You have to have that drive for continuous improvement. So for you to improve, you have to invest the time. For you to invest the time, you have to be disciplined, you know, because to be able to train on a regular basis, you need to have a certain level of discipline. So as a result, what happened over the years, I got to realize, I was fortunate enough to realize this quite early in my career, that there's a direct correlation with what I was doing outside work, running or cycling, with what I was doing at work, you know. The organizations that we lead or we are part of, there's a certain level of continuous growth that you have to drive. You have to ensure that you're always raising the bar. And, certainly for me with cycling, if I tell you one of my first, one of the big races, you probably, I don't know if you remember this when you were back in South Africa, there's a race called 94.7. We did not talk about it.
Yes, yes.
94.7 is arguably, so Cape Town Cycle Tour is the largest timed race in the world. I mean, it's got something like 30,000 cyclists, okay? And then you have got a race that is arguably much bigger because of exposure, because it's in Johannesburg, right? Because Johannesburg is like from an economy point of view, is the hub. So this race, when I did it the first time, I had a very, very long day in the saddle, I must tell you. I think if I recall correctly, I did something like 6 hours. This is 94.7 kilometers. That's why it's called the 94.7 cycle challenge.
Right.
So I did it just over 6 hours. And you must remember, in these races, you have to qualify or you have to do seeding. Seeding means you have to, other races that you do influence the start time that you have in a race. As you can imagine, if you have got 20,000 cyclists starting a race, we can't all start at the same time.
Right.
So the seeding, what it does, it creates batches of people based on their time, based on their average distance or time per kilometer that they do on other races. So you would do that. So they had to seed. So what it means is that you can't just wait to go ride 94.7 in November. It means you have to train and ride other races. Otherwise, you're going to start with the slowest people or the novices or the people that are starting, which is at 10 in the morning. So 10 in the morning, you are going to have a very, very long day, because it means you are going to be faced, this is November, this is the middle of summer. You are going to be faced with the heat, you're going to be faced with all kinds of things. Now, if you're talking 6 hours, you can imagine. So I start at 10, I'm going to finish after 4. This is crazy. So you realize that that's not sustainable, at least for someone who is ambitious, who wants to improve. Long story short, my personal record in the 94.7 today is 2:52, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but under 3 hours, which is, yeah. So from just over 6 hours, I now do a sub 3 hours. And the sub 3 hours means you start early. So sub 3 hours, I start now before 6 in the morning. By 9 o'clock, some people are starting and I'm done. So, So there's that. What that teaches you, it teaches you that nothing comes easy. You have to train, you have to be disciplined, and you have to be passionate about what you're doing. I think there's a certain level of passion that you have to have. You really have to enjoy, because you can't be putting your body through what you're putting it through and not enjoying it. So for me, that has really, the reason I am still doing the things that I do today outside the boardroom is because what it does for me. And the most important thing, Rish, this is the mind. I think as much as I train and do everything, yes, the training is important, but something that's even more important is here. It's the mind.
Right.
This cycling and this running, it has taught me to really open my mind and really, really be mentally fit as well. It's amazing how powerful the mind is. I say to people, even during this COVID-19 period, this crisis that we're in, I'm sure you've heard stories of people that they start feeling fluish or coughing a little bit, and then the mind takes over.
Right.
You are in a very, very dark place. So, the mind is very, very powerful.
You said one very crucial thing in that summary about these races, and that is you have to enjoy it. You can't put your body through something if you're not having fun and you're not enjoying it. What do you enjoy the most?
What I enjoy the most is I'm very competitive. I mean, let's put it out there. But I think as I get older or over the years, one thing that I have learned is that the number one person that I should be competing with is myself, which is something that I do not have to compete with the next person. It's good to compete with other people, but it starts with me competing with myself. So that's something that I've realized is so, so powerful, because if I compete with myself, the marginal gains that I have are so, so, so powerful. Obviously, you take that and you benchmark it with your peers, and you realize that, you know what, how do I close the gap? You know, and the other thing that's also quite important is, you know, I think it's important to also spend your time or do these things with like-minded people, you know, with people that have got the same aspirations or have got aspirations to better themselves, you know. Every day that I wake up, it does not matter whether it is cycling or it's a work that I do, whatever it is, or it's parenting, I want to be better than I was yesterday. So this is something that over the years I have really, really come to be conscious about, you know. I think, I mean, again, it speaks to the mind that I mentioned.
Right.
You know, consciousness is something that's quite important, because we can be present but not there, you know.
Right.
So consciousness is something that's quite important. So I'm very conscious about every single thing that I do. Yes, I'm not perfect. I'm a human being.
Right.
But what I do, I try to reflect on a whole lot of things, you know. Because one of the things that you mentioned, that I did computer science and statistics, and I live with a statistician, and data is something that I get seriously obsessed about. You know, I always like analyzing data. You know, the run that I did this morning. Fortunately, we've got technology that supports this stuff
Right.
today. So one of the things, my wife laughs at me all the time, because I would go do a race or go do a ride or whatever it is. When I come back, we've got plans as a family and everything, but I end up spending a bit of time analyzing the data. I want to see, where did I get it wrong? Where did I get it right? How do I improve, and things like that. So for me, it is something that it is a level of discipline that I have gained over the years, and I try to focus a lot on that. And that, like I said, this level of detail or discipline helps me with other aspects of life, which is a win-win for all.
Diving into your career, you know,
Mm-hmm.
tying it into what you just said as well from a discipline perspective, you know, I really love how you placed it, where you say, you know, you have to discipline yourself before you can discipline everything else. And it's all
Yeah.
in your mind. And so I guess the same with leadership. You have to lead yourself before you lead everything else, right? But it's, you know, your family, your social career, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the leadership principles that you personally live by?
You know, I think one of the benefits I had was I was led from a very young age, and was given responsibility, and I had to account on a number of things from a very young age. And it's something that has always been a big part of me. You know, in the spirit of Nelson Mandela, as we were talking about the Nelson Mandela Challenge, one of his quotes, you know, this guy is world renowned for having the most amazing quotes you can find. One of his quotes is, a winner is a dreamer who never gives up,
Right.
right? And you know, when you take that and you say, what is it that makes one to be a leader? Because I think, you know, there's all of us, we have the potential to be leaders. All of us. I am a strong believer that there's nothing special about you and me, okay? But it's about what we do over and above the average, right? Over above the average efforts that everybody does, you know? For example, there's a book, I'm trying to remember the name. It talks about, by Robin Sharma. It
The
talks
5
about
a.m. club?
lead with no title.
Oh, the leader with no title? Yeah.
Lead with no title. And what it talks about basically is, all of us, it's not about the title that we have, right? At the end of the day, when you're a leader, it's to work with people to lead themselves without waiting to be led as well. To give,
Right.
if we were to run organizations and empower people to be able to lead themselves, to be able to feel empowered. I think as a leader is someone who gives people that belief in themselves that, you know what, as much as I have got a leader, because a leader shouldn't be just a boss or someone who's got a title that's higher than you, but a leader is someone who will make you believe in yourself, who will make you do things that you never thought you'd be able to do. So certainly my style of leadership, if we were to talk about styles of leadership, I think I am a big believer in inspirational leadership. You know, inspirational leadership is leadership where you look at other people, what they are doing, other leaders, and you get inspired by what they are doing. And as a result, everything that I do, I try to inspire people that are in my life. Okay, whether it's people that I work with, or it's people that are in my circles, and certainly also try to get inspiration from other people, because all of us need to constantly feed this this beast that's hungry to be better all the time. You know, so I constantly try to inspire people, and in inspiring people, we take it for granted. I sometimes feel bad, actually. I used to feel bad. I don't anymore. I guess, again, it happens with age. There are things that change as you get older, because my kids laugh at me. I tell them, you know what, I don't easily get embarrassed. I used to, but nowadays I don't easily get embarrassed, because it's something that as you get older, you sort of, you're not doing things to please other people,
Right.
right? So when I talk to people, certainly my team, I always talk on a Monday. I would talk about my weekend, and I would talk about the things that I do. I would talk about what I conquered, and I would talk about how I conquered a fear, how I did X, Y, and Z, whether I did a bungee jump or I did X, Y, and Z. Those things, it's things that we really, really take for granted when we're talking about inspirational leadership. It's those things. If you are talking to 100 people, if you have 10 of those people that latch on that, and they draw something out of it, and they get inspired to do things differently, I feel that I have achieved my part as leading, as a leader. So that's one of the things. Inspirational leadership is at the core of everything that I do. In the olden days, possibly it was termed in business school, they'll talk about leading by example.
Mm.
It's those things. People, when you are in a privilege, I think leadership is also a position of privilege. We should be honest with ourselves. So we need to always be conscious about the responsibilities that we have, and never take for granted that the people, our kids, I've just narrated a story that I saw my parents, but my parents were doing it naturally back then, but they'd never realized what they were doing would shape the person that I am today. So what that tells me is that every day that I spend with my kids, or every day that I spend with people in my life, I should never ever take for granted some of the things that people are looking at. And certainly I'm doing the same with other people that inspire me.
It's difficult to inspire virtually, I would imagine.
It is, but it's not impossible, to
Right.
be honest. I think in my organization, one of the things that early during lockdown, I had to think deep and think about how do we, and keep in mind that back in the days, we went into lockdown in South Africa on the 26th of March. But my organization, we worked from home beginning of March. So, which means it was all of March, April, May, June, July. So it's been a number of months now. Okay. So I was thinking, but back then, none of us, I think, really thought we would be at home for this long,
Right.
right? So one of the things, a month or two later, I had to think about what is it that we can do with the team on a regular basis. So what I did, I obviously, you do what you're good at, and part of what I'm good at is being physical. Exercise is something that I believe in. And a big part of that is that, interesting enough, this war that we're in, fighting this COVID-19 virus, is a big part of it, not a big part of it. It's all about immunity, right? It's about a virus that attacks your immune system. So as a leader, one of the things I wanted to do was to do my best to help people ensure that their immune system is not compromised, okay? The best I can, because we're all living in different households, we all faced with different, we're exposed to different things, but certainly one of the things that I could influence was to encourage people to be active. So long story short, what we did, I started a virtual exercise, which is very tricky. And you know, when you reflect on this, it's something that many people, I've been following YouTube channels. You know, when you train, it's easy. You want a cardio workout and you go to YouTube, you find everything. So you find a cardio workout and you do that, and you would do that, or stretching after a run or a cycle, you would do that. So I thought maybe I should do that and invite people. Obviously, you have to do it in a way that you're not going to make people feel like
I have to, yeah.
they have to. You know, I did it in a very open way to say whoever is willing, and I was pleasantly surprised, Rich. The very first one that we had, there were about 10 of us, right? Pleasantly surprised. So I did those. We did that on a Tuesday. It's a cardio workout that we do. On a Thursday, it's yoga. You know, just for people just to relax, to just to reflect on things, and so that's what we've been doing. And then the other thing was to have a social. I've been having a social, which is very tricky, but it's possible. You know, you have a social with people. That's the best you can do in these circumstances. So we have a social. We just chat. We don't talk about work at all. We're just talking about things in general. We're getting into winter. I know some of the conversations were about people wanting to get a fireplace. People talking about a solar system. Because of some of our challenges that we have with power. We won't get into that. Power supply, not power, with power supply, electricity. So through that, we have been able to really manage, and you realize though that you have to continuously reinvent yourself, because as you can appreciate, this video conferencing tends to be, it's very tiring.
Right.
So you have to continuously reinvent yourself. We started having things like having quiz evenings. It's amazing. People would want to join. Sometimes they'll join with their kids. Things like that. So it's one way of trying to survive this, because I believe that we are all in the same storm, all in the same storm globally. It doesn't matter where you are, but we're all on different boats, so what we need to do every now and then is to help each other to build resilience, to help each other be strong mentally, because it is tough for people to be overnight, to be forced to stay at home overnight. Now you have to do your work, you have to look after your kids, you have to do all these things, and it can be overwhelming. So basically, as a leader, one of the things I had to do is, in a very comfortable space, create a comfortable space, for almost like creating a family within the organization, so that people can be comfortable and basically can all of us can learn to be resilient.
In addition to balancing your family and the team that you lead as well, you have a ton of customers across South Africa that depend on you, that depend on your organization. Their success is pretty much influenced and controlled in some points, by the services that you provide. And so how do you find that balance between the family, the team, and the business itself? Talk to me about that.
So I think in the beginning it was a tough balance, Rich. You probably can appreciate, because like me, you are part of a technology, you are in the tech industry, so you can appreciate this. Most of us are used to this kind of life. Maybe it's a bit extreme now, but we used to living, having conversations like this in a video conference. So to a certain degree, adapting to this was not as complicated as it is for people that were not used to it. So certainly in the out there from a customers or companies that we are engaging with on a daily basis, people had to overnight embrace technology. I don't know if you saw that joke. There was a joke about the whole story about digitization, that people have been talking about digitization, but COVID-19 overnight was that basically that catalyst to get companies to be digital. Because if you do not have a facility like Zoom or Teams or all these technologies or WebEx, it means your business stops basically. So companies had to embrace that. So to answer your question, it was a very slow transition to that, but certainly what it has created, from a leadership perspective, it's also taught me, or certainly a lot of us, that we have to lead with empathy. You can't just, it's not business as usual. Because what you're doing, like now, I'm literally inside your home. You are literally inside my home. So when we're engaging with people, we're literally living in people's homes. We have to respect that. We have to respect the fact that people are dealing with a whole lot more than what's on the agenda for the meeting. So as a result, leading with empathy is something that's, it's not a luxury. It's something that it teaches us that at the end of the day, we are all human beings, So for me, that has been the biggest thing around COVID. I think as much as it is tough going through this process, there is from a human race perspective, there is some silver lining that we see. People talk about the new normal, but this new normal, I think, is a big part of I know that it's a big part of our future, because we were talking about the future of work. You would know that we were talking about the future of work for many, many, many years, right? But I think the future is here with us now.
Right.
So certainly there are positives out of this. When I talk about the silver lining, I can tell you certainly about myself. In my career, I've been fortunate enough that I've worked for multinationals my entire life. And one of the things that happens when you work for multinationals is that you don't spend much time at home. You get to travel a lot.
Right.
And you would know that novelty wears out at some point, but what you miss out on, there are family events, there are things that you miss out on, What this thing has created now, this crisis, what it has created, it's given us an opportunity to spend time, as difficult as it is. But I have never spent this amount of time with my kids, with my wife, as in a consecutive way, as in, it's been 5 months, we are together. And, it's actually, I think for me, it's a huge silver lining, because it teaches you something. And it's amazing now in lockdown, the things that we took for granted, we now really, really appreciate. So certainly for me, the big thing around this COVID-19, this crisis, is the human element. All of us have had to tap into that leading with the heart, So certainly that's what I try and do in my everyday life.
Tapping into your coaching and your mentorship that you continuously do, what advice do you have for the up and coming leaders watching this that just want to become better, that want to make an impact, not just to their business, but to the people that they represent as well? What do you say to them?
One of the things I hate, okay, my 9-year-old daughter would tell me, "Daddy, hate is a strong word, okay, but I don't like." Okay, maybe let's say I don't like is people who say it's not my job, and there's a lot of us who suffer from that, and we do not realize that this not my job is actually a cancer that can really, really mess up your career, because doing the things that you believe are not your job, that's where the growth is, because growth is not in the comfort zone. It's definitely not. All of us need to really understand that it's not in the comfort zone. So what I would encourage people who are aspiring to be leaders, is, I think there's a certain element of we all need to believe that leaders don't create followers; they create more leaders. So it is something that's really, really, really important. The things that I've just shared now, talking about, if you want to go that extra mile in terms of leadership and being able, and I'm not saying we are the best of the best in what we're doing, Rish, but I think to that analogy around David Goggins, this guy is amazing. I mean, if people haven't read his book, they should read it. They shouldn't be turned off at the beginning, because you can easily be turned off at the beginning when you read the book, because he's gangster,
Right.
But when you talk about that 40%, I know it's in a training environment, is talking about from a training perspective. But if all of us apply that in our lives, that everything that we do, talking about going that extra mile, that makes a huge, huge difference in life. That is something that I strongly, strongly believe anyone who aspires to be, because as much as people want to be leaders, people want to be there, this is not easy. I'm sure you can agree with me on this, Rich. It's not easy, but it is so fulfilling when you see the investment that you're making, trying to lead, trying to create an environment where people feel led and people feel like, we know where we're going, so yeah.
So one of the reasons we're putting this content out is primarily because of that. It's primarily to enable people with the right advice and the right guidance around how to grow, but also how to get out of that comfort zone as well, right? How to continuously get out of that comfort zone and continuously adopt a growth mindset, maximize potential. I'm a firm believer that consistency compounds. The more you continue to do the things that, as you say, are not your job, the more you grow and you build that muscle and that skill set to become that strong overall general leader, right? And you have all these different type of experiences in multiple facets of any world or any industry that you're in. And super profound. Thank you for sharing that. Zuko, what is it that you want to be known for?
I think, yeah, making a difference, Rich. For me, it's really not about a title. It's really not about anything material. It's about making a difference in other people's lives. And making a difference in other people's lives could mean a whole lot of things. We, all of us, we need to have we need to aspire to leave something that will be remembered for. And certainly what I'll be remembered for is, what I would like to be remembered for is the contribution that I made to humankind. There's a lot that is out there for all of us. And certainly this period is a time to reflect. And it's actually, the timing for this is actually quite profound, because during this period, there's a lot that I had to reflect on, about my own life, about life in general, about how, as much as there are things that we're chasing as individuals, trying to make a life for our families and do all these wonderful things. But I think all of us have a bigger purpose in life. And I think for me, that bigger purpose in life is to leave an imprint in people's hearts. People should remember me, or remember me for, all these attributes that I took from my father. Is if I were to be like him, I would be an amazing person. That's my belief. But kindness, just being kind. And the biggest thing about being kind is that we, as a kid, my father was a very kind man, but you'd easily think, people generally think that when you're kind, it's associated with being timid, and it's not.
Right.
And you realize when you're kind, you actually touch people's hearts, So for me, I would like to be remembered for touching people's hearts. And touching people's hearts could mean a whole lot of things, whether it's helping people better what they are doing or better their craft or think differently about life in general or be better spouse or whatever it is, touching their heart. At the end of the day, for me, it's kindness and humility, doing it in the most humble manner. That's me.
It's funny that you say that kindness sometimes gets convoluted and it's translated into being timid. One
Yeah.
of the things, this is probably my most favorite thing to talk about, is the spectrum of being humble and being confident. And sometimes when you're too humble, you get perceived as being timid. Sometimes when you're too confident, you get perceived as being arrogant. And the art of kindness is right in the middle. The art is like finding your balance.
You are absolutely on the money there. Absolutely on the money there. Maybe just touching on values because I'm quite passionate about this, Rish. Touching on values. When I look at my family values, and this is something that I am trying very hard to inculcate with my own nuclear family. Obviously one is the kindness that I've mentioned. The other one is integrity. I think all of us we need to live lives with integrity. That's something that's quite important. If
Right.
I say I'm going to do something, I must do that something. If I say I'm going to, integrity is something that's quite important. The other one that's quite important, and it's funny enough, I was having this conversation with my kids recently, is conviction. You realize when you're an adult that one of the things, as much as we want to take our kids to the best schools, uh, um, there's something that's bigger than just going to school and learning a curriculum. But one of the things that we can teach our kids is to do things with conviction, to believe in themselves. That self-esteem is something that you have, because I've seen, Rish, it's very, very, and we all struggled with that because when we started our careers, it was not easy to, stand in front of a group of 1,000 people. And this is that self-esteem that you build at a very, very young age. We have an opportunity now to do it for our kids. So that's that. Excellence in our work is something that I am super obsessed with because I believe that, again, to that passion that I spoke about from cycling or running, we have to, if we are investing the amount of time that we invest doing what we're doing for a living, we need to do the best in that. Excellence in our work is something that's important. And then the last one is, this is things that I learned from my family growing up, is humility. Again, humility and kindness, there's that getting linked to being timid. And the other spectrum is that arrogance, and you spot on finding that whole, how do you be humble but not taken for granted? How do you not too arrogant or this? You need to find a way in the middle ground, and that, I think, that's where possibly it's where one of my favorite authors. I don't know if you've read a book by Jim Collins, Good to Great. One of the things, it's not in that book, but he talks about the X factor of leadership is not personality, it's humility. The X factor of leadership is not personality,
Right.
is humility. So it's not about me to be well known or this and this, it's humility. So that's something that's important.
We
Okay, so
we probably need to end soon, but there's so much of quality coming out from everything that you're saying. And one of the things you've brought up there in that summary was the self-esteem piece. And you said a lot of folks today, intimidated, reluctant, hesitant to speak in public, to communicate in public only because of the way they sound, the way they will be perceived. And it all translates into that self-esteem. I know so many individuals today that have massive amounts of talent around communicating, articulating, and I'm sure you see the same thing too, right? Primarily in the technology world, we can have an internal meeting and there's an individual that can just be shining and sparkling, and then suddenly once it's set out on the public stage, things change. And so what would
exactly.
be your advice to the folks that actually struggle with that? that have that intimidation for going out there, representing their own quality?
It's actually quite interesting. Again, I love analogies because they describe things better than we possibly can articulate them. You know, my wife has been. I've been trying to get my wife into cycling for many years, right?
Mhm.
And I've been failing dismally. But you know, I play the long game, and I've always known the bug will bite eventually. You know, so again, thanks to again that's that silver line. There's always a silver lining with everything. During lockdown, my wife for the first time showed interest in cycling. Right. So I started riding with her, and you know, learning. You know, we got a bike and everything. You know, but one of the things that she had to deal with, and she's still dealing with, but she's much better now, was fear. You know, all of us, one of the things that we have to deal with is fear. And fear is, you know, it's one of the most important thing anyone can master is how to conquer fear, because the minute we conquer our fears, we on the other side of good, right? So in helping her to conquer this fear, and I've been telling her, you know what, I've been cycling for 17 years. I am not going to give you a silver bullet on how to ride a bicycle. It's within you. You need to practice, practice, practice. So to your point around how do people help themselves, this is, I mean, it's something as silly as in front of a mirror, you know, just presenting to yourself, doing something, saying something, you know, it sounds so silly, but I can tell you, even the best of the best have done that, you know, because when you do that, you are practicing, you are trying to, and as well, when you're presenting something, there's a certain element. My wife taught me this many years ago, interesting enough. She said this to me in my early days. She would say to me, but you know, why are you nervous about this presentation? And I'd say, no. And by the way, if you're not nervous, something is not right. It
Right.
doesn't matter how good we are in what we do. I think there's always going to be that element of nerves, because especially when you're a perfectionist, because you want to perfect what you're doing. So she would say the fact that you are standing in front of an audience and you are presenting, it means you know something. You know, you need to be sharing this thing that you know in front of those people. So, you know, instead of putting everything onto that audience that you are so fearful of, or, you know, you feel like, oh, all these people, feel yourself that there is a reason that today you are presenting to those people. So there's many ways of trying to fight to this fear and be more confident in what you do. I don't know if that answers your question, Vic.
100% it does. That's brilliant.
Super.
Zuko, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time on your weekend and coming to talk to me and coming to share this good stuff and good quality information with the world. You know, you're very near and dear to my heart. You know, I've got a lot of admiration and respect for everything that you've
Likewise.
done. And so I really appreciate you being on here. Thank you so much, Zuko. This has been moving.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having me today. I think it's been really amazing. I've told you this before, that I am super proud of the stuff that you're doing, you know,
Thank you.
and this is taking it to a different level, my man. This is really taking to a different level. This series is just mind blowing. You know, for me, I think it's a platform that gives people an opportunity to, you know, to learn stuff, you know, to hear stories. You know, I'm a big believer of storytelling. You know, I think we learn through stories. You know, we come from our parents and our grandparents. You know, they used to tell stories. That's how we got to learn things. I think this series is creating that platform of storytelling, and this is something that's quite powerful. And I think in wrapping up, one of the things that I would strongly recommend to people, I know people nowadays, you know, reading time, there's no time in this, but I think, by the way, I think there will never be time. We need to create time. It's an investment. Reading a book is an investment in us. But we live in a world in 2020 where there's audiobooks, and some of the books I mentioned and many others in audiobooks, they are amazing things. I go for a walk or a run, I listen to a book. You know, the David Goggins book that I was talking about, I read the book, but I couldn't get enough. I listened to the story while running, and I can still hear this guy's voice. So how amazing it is. And last but not least, I think Netflix is super, super, super amazing. You know, one of the best things I did for myself during this lockdown was watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan and the NBA story. You know, it's not only about Michael Jordan, it's about a number of people, but I think it speaks directly to leadership. Directly to leadership. I will not spoil it for anyone, but this is today, if there's anything I were to recommend, watch The Last Dance. You will not regret. It's amazing. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, I'm sure everybody watching this in the US right now is probably thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. The Last Dance, you know, it's based on the NBA, but it was not released on Netflix until just a couple weeks ago, but it was released everywhere else in the world. It's so ironic how that happened.